Welcome back to Bulldog Insider. Time to check in with our Bulldogs in the NFL. Couple former Fresno State guys in action yesterday for Wild Card Weekend. Devontae Adams had 5 receptions for 72 yards in the Rams' win over Carolina. His teammate, Rams running back Ronnie Rivers, returned 3 kickoffs for 73 total yards. And Packers safety and former Bulldog captain Evan Williams had 7 tackles in Green Bay's loss to Chicago. Well, speaking of former dogs in the NFL, we learned this week that former Fresno State quarterback Trent Dilfer is returning to the sidelines as a head coach. The former Bulldog QB was let go as UAB's head football coach in the middle of this past season, but on Thursday, he was rehired as the head man of the football program at Lipscomb Academy, a private high school in Nashville. Before taking the UAB job, Dilfer led Lipscomb to consecutive Tennessee State titles in 2021 and 2022. Former Bulldog running back Robbie Rouse is joining Tim Skipper's staff at Cal Poly. Couple former Bulldogs reuniting in SLO. Rouse previously coached the running backs for Cal Poly in 2022. Of course, he's Fresno State's all-time leading rusher with 4,647 yards. Well, Dilfer and Rouse, 2 of the many great players who've made the history of Fresno State athletics so special. Trent and Robbie did their work on the gridiron. But another Bulldog baller left quite a legacy on the hardwood. Here's Scott with a special guest in this week's Bulldog Baller.
All right, we're talking about the great Rod Higgins here on this edition of Bulldog Ballers. I'm joined by Marc Q Jones, the voice of Fresno State basketball, the radio analyst. And Coach, when you think about Rod Higgins as a Bulldog, what comes to mind?
I think about everybody in elementary school fighting for the number 22. Because you think about kids that they want to wear 23, but back then in the Fresno area, you wanted to wear number 22 because everybody wanted to be Rod Higgins. They had their wristbands like Rod. Everybody tried to run like Rod, but nobody could play like Rod. But our parents said Rod is the great example. That's who you want to be like. He was very kind, he's approachable. Can't say enough about him, and that's just as a person. He's even greater ball player, right? So you hear it that way, but he was a great person, and he was a great ball player here at Fresno State.
Of course, out of the Chicago area, part of that famous Chicago connection with Boyd Grant and Coach Thrash and everybody there at Fresno State around the late 70s and the early 80s. Got the Dogs to the NCAA tournament, for the first time. When that was happening, and like that, I don't know what to call it, but it was kind of like a renaissance for Fresno State basketball, and they were on the national stage all of a sudden. How much did Rod Higgins have to do with that, and what was that like here growing up in the Valley?
Well, I mean, it was everything to see him. And that whole program, you talk about Coach Grant, he was, if you look at, Coach Lombardi in Green Bay, just that kind of persona, that's what he had here. He was the guy in terms of basketball. It changed the lives of a lot of us. Just Coach Thrash getting those Chicago guys here, it impacted for 30 years. And I can tell you how, because when Higgins went to the Bulls, if you ever watched Jordan's documentary, he talks about the times of the NBA, the character. He connected with Rod Higgins. And Higgins was the guy who brought Jordan here. And at that, I remember back then the great coach at North Carolina, Dean Smith, said that he didn't know if Fresno State wasn't one of the best teams in the country that year. But they ran into a real big issue, Patrick Ewing and the Hoyas.
Yeah, that was always a problem.
Yes,
in the early 80s was Patrick Ewing. Rod Higgins, you mentioned that, he has stayed in basketball in a prominent role, went on to become, a front office guy, for NBA clubs. And he really became one of the, the big names in the sport, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was just getting into coaching, and I knew some guys on the Warriors. I knew Paul Pressey and some other guys at Golden State that time that were Nelly type of guys. Rod had come in and played with Nelly. I think that's where he ended his career at Golden State. And he was so highly respected. And they all talked about the fundamental basketball that came out of the Fresno area. And Higgins really represented that, very highly intelligent. Like I said, really approachable. He was a great teammate. And I thought he did a great job when he was a GM.
All right, sum up the Bulldog legacy of Rod Higgins.
Wow, that's a great question. I think that when you think of Rod, you went to Selma Arena. You saw how approachable he was to his accomplishments. And just think the best player ever connected to Rod and would come to Fresno every year for his good friend. What else can you say? I don't know how to put words to that. That's a Paul Leffler question, but I'll talk to him about it.
All right, that's Marc Q Jones on the great Rod Higgins. Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.
Coming up, Bob Fraley accomplished a lot of special things at Fresno State, and perhaps the most special involved his son Doug. A look back at another great moment in Bulldog history is on the way.
And my favorite is the Bulldog helmet up there, which was given to my grandfather as a gift from Pat Hill quite a few years ago.
We'll show you how these Fresno State football superfans who turned their dining room into a Bulldog den. You'll meet Leslie and Freddie Rao after the break. Bulldog Insider returns after this.